You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Do you want to experience the thrill of a Packers game at Lambeau Field? If so, be sure to get your guaranteed authentic tickets from theticketking.com, a longtime trusted source and local Green Bay business. Just go to packerstalk.com/tickets for more information and ticket links. That's packerstalk.com/tickets.
Welcome to Packers Talk. Oh, there we go. Volume thing's messing with me there. Welcome to Packers Weekly Podcast, part of the PackersTalk.com network. I am your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton, and we are diehard Packers fans. I just love talking about the Pack. So we're not getting into all the national sports media headlines and talking points. We promise to avoid world-famous pop stars and Super Bowl winning tight ends, at least as far as it goes beyond the field. We're getting into real football, though, guys. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season and getting into all the drama and the rumors of the offseason. So if y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials and subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. Those things help us out a lot, make a big difference, and they're free and only take a couple seconds. So hook us up if you would, y'all. But welcome, Tim. How you doing this evening, sir?
Good evening. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's, a little bit of shame that the football season is now officially over for everyone. We won't see another game until, at least one that counts, until September. So, yeah, that's obviously a few weeks removed from the Packers loss. So the real football season ended a few weeks ago, but now the official end of football season. So, yeah.
Now, hang on. We do get, what is it, USFL this year? Or what is it?
Whatever it is. Yeah, so actual real football doesn't start again until NFL training camp, I guess.
Yep.
And we're not even, preseason's preseason. So a real football game that counts for something's what? It's 7 months away. 7 months away. So yeah, it's always a sad time, I think, a little bit. And now we start in the draft season, free agency season, and what hopefully won't be a long off season. Hopefully it goes fast and we can get to see the boys back out on the field pretty soon here. And
here's to that, man. Let's see them get back out there soon enough. It can't happen soon enough, but July will come quick. We got a lot of fun stuff to go through. We got the draft coming up. We got plenty to talk about before the draft. Draft's always exciting. Free agency period's always kind of exciting, especially now that we've got a GM who will go out there if he needs to. It sounds like he might. But yeah, there's plenty to keep us busy until we hit that real ugly part of the sports calendar in June. Playoff basketball, playoff hockey, it's all over. You're in the middle of the baseball season where it's baseball doesn't really matter for another few months anyway either. So we're not there yet. We can enjoy some other stuff before then. But shoot, man, what did you think about that Super Bowl? Did you enjoy it?
I didn't have a strong rooting interest. Wanted the Chiefs just because I can't stand the 49ers, but I'm not attached to the Chiefs, and I'm, kind of getting sick of seeing them all the time.
Yeah.
Good for them. Credit to them. They're a great team with a generational quarterback.
No doubt.
So, a lot of respect for him. It's getting kind of old.
A little bit.
So I was happy to see the Chiefs win, but it wasn't like I was there, screaming and cheering or anything like that. And the game itself, I thought, was kind of sloppy, especially first half. It was kind of, really into the third quarter. A lot of punts, a lot of failed red zone opportunities on both sides. It was kind of an ugly game. Had 2 turnovers on both sides. And then I think the fourth quarter and overtime, it was more exciting and picked up as the Chiefs came back and took the lead, and then the Niners took the lead or tied it and took the lead. And, it went back and forth into the end. And one strategy really came into it. So I think it got better as the game went on, but for the most part, it wasn't a great Super Bowl, even though it was close. But yeah, I think the better team, or at least the team with the better quarterback, won the game. And, the 49ers, they weren't able to punch in some opportunities that they had. And when they had a 10-0 lead and they weren't able to stretch that, it kind of felt inevitable that Mahomes was going to bring them back. Like, you needed to keep scoring. 10 points wasn't enough. And he's gotten down 10 points in all the Super Bowls he's played in now, which is kind of crazy. Now he's 3-1 in those games. But it just felt like, you're letting them hang around. The Chiefs did not play a good first half on offense. They really couldn't get anything going until they got the late field goal in the first half. But you just kept them around for way too long, and you're going to give Mahomes a chance. He's going to beat you, and he finds a way. And we've talked about it at times here. Especially going into the Packers game, like, it's a different Chiefs team. They're not that explosive offense this year, where he's throwing bombs or he's getting outside the pocket and making big plays. It's kind of like a take what's their offense, but
yeah,
Mahomes has learned how to play that way, and that's kind of scary because he can light you up with deep shots, and he can take what's there, and just, if it takes 9-10 plays to go down the field and score a touchdown, he'll do that. And I think he showed that again in the Super Bowl, especially with the drive in overtime that won it. Like, he can be patient and just beat you with 1,000 cuts instead of just one big bomb over your head. So Chiefs defense was really good. But they had stretches too where they had problems with the run, and I think the 49ers got away from that and probably put a little bit too much on Brock Purdy. But yeah, overall, I think the better team won. Really questionable decision in overtime for Shanahan to take the ball instead of starting on defense. Like, I kind of get
Can we visit that for a second though? Because all the idea flying around that he didn't know or they didn't know the overtime rules. The ref told the entire stadium the overtime rules.
Right.
What do you mean you didn't know the overtime rules? That's where I'm just like, I'm not accepting that. I don't accept that. Now, I will accept that maybe a player wasn't exactly familiar with the overtime rules, but
yeah,
get out of here if Shanahan didn't know it. I don't buy that at all.
And shame on him. I know it's the first overtime playoff game under these new rules that they had changed to, a few years ago now. I guess it is 2-3 years ago, however long they've been in place. And it's the first time it's happened. But as a head coach, you definitely need to know what the rules are. So I think Shanahan knew, but you're probably right. There are probably a few players who didn't really understand it or didn't follow along when it was being explained to them.
Yeah.
And that's on them. But
right.
The Chiefs seemed to know, and they said after the game, like, they all knew what was going on because they had gone over it as a team in a team meeting, which is great preparation by the Chiefs to, bring that up as a possibility. Like, hey, if this happens, this is the situation. Here's what we're going to do.
And maybe the Niners didn't have the team meeting about it. I could see that. But to say that Shanahan didn't know the overtime rules, like, I don't buy that at all.
No, I think he knew, and I think he just decided to take the ball first. And I think maybe he was thinking, we're going to go down and get 7 points and force them to get 7 to extend it, or they win, basically, or they go for 2 and try to win it there. But yeah, I think looking back on it, you probably want to know what the Chiefs do first and then what you have to do.
That's what I would think, put your defense out there and, go after Mahomes, put the pressure entirely on him from the get-go. Yeah, that was a questionable move, man. But I mean, you said it, right? Like, you needed to do more than that to escape the inevitability of Pat Mahomes. And he's done it. I was talking to somebody about this earlier. Even when he was, very early on in his career, that first playoff run that he had to the Super Bowl, they got down, I think, in every playoff game by a lot. I think I remember them coming back over like the Titans and the Bengals, maybe. I can't remember what.
Yeah,
I don't want to be too specific, but he was like the comeback kid there. It's like they were out of it for several games and they came back and found a way to win. So it's just like, man, this guy, he's savvy. He's got the experience for days. He's got as much experience as you could ask for. Yeah. He's not going to get worse at those comebacks. So that was something that, and I guess I said this about the 49ers with the Lions. It's like, it's Michael Myers, man. Like, there's just no outrunning that team. You might have thought you were ahead of them, but they just didn't stop. And how much do you think the Greenlaw injury played into it?
I think it was definitely a factor. I mean, you lose a player that is as good as he is, it's going to hurt you. Yeah, I think it definitely factored into the game. You could kind of see some things open up for the Chiefs after he went out offensively. So yeah. To lose a player who's that good, the way he got in, I mean, running on the field and he pops his Achilles. Never seen anything like that.
That's a killer, man.
Yeah, and it definitely had to affect them. I mean, I don't think they completely fell apart from that point forward, but it changes your defense, and it probably changes how they can call certain things on defense and how they can match up to them a little bit. So yeah, there was definitely an effect.
Yeah, I think so too, man. Packers fans know who he was replaced by. Good old Oren Burks. And, I'll own up to it. We were using Oren Burks in his PFF grade as an example of, maybe Joe Barry's lack of ability to coach, because it looked like he went over there and was playing much better than he did for the Packers. And not so much in replacement in that game yesterday, man. That was rough. Whew.
Yeah, he struggled a little bit. But I don't know if, here's another former Packer that was in the game that I thought played really well, was Mike Pennell on the Chiefs defensive line.
Yeah, I did see that.
He was wrecking things in the running game. And that was always, the guy's he's huge. I mean, he's a big dude. And I remember he was on the Packers and it was like, what? Like, what's the problem here? He was always kind of a tease for the couple years they had him. And
he did have some flashes. We're like,
all right, and he never really put it together, and then he was out, and I know he's bounced around a little bit, but he had a hell of a game, I thought, on Sunday against the 49ers in the Super Bowl. He was really good affecting the line of scrimmage and blowing up some running plays. So at least that was one former Packer that we saw had a good game.
And then for just the Wisconsin, loyalists and out there, Leo Chanel had himself a game. I think he had the highest PFF grade. And I know J.J. Watt doesn't like the PFF grades and all the players usually, but it's a frame of reference, so we use it.
Right.
But yeah, man, he had himself a game. He had the blocked kick. So yeah, kind of fun to see some of these ties back to the Packers, and maybe the fact that Oren Burks isn't with the Packers anymore. We got a little validation there. But anyway, no need to kick a man while he's down. What do you think you took away from the Super Bowl there? Was there anything to take away, from these teams going into next season?
I just think it shows that the Packers aren't too far off from being among the best teams in the league. We saw that in the playoffs against Dallas and the 49ers. So I don't think they're far off. They have to get better, obviously, and I think their biggest improvement is going to come from the guys within. So it's that internal improvement. The guys,
absolutely,
especially offensively, because of how young they are at skill positions. Jordan Love's going to go into his second year as a starter. Like, those guys making that jump and continuing to improve themselves can be the biggest team improvement that they make, more so than anybody they draft or anybody they may sign or trade for in free agency. Just your internal improvement. And if they make that jump, particularly on offense, and we can talk about defense too, but particularly on offense, that's going to raise the level of the team so much and make them among the contenders. So that's, I don't see them being far off, but where I do see like differences is how physical the Chiefs and the 49ers were at the line of scrimmage, both sides of the ball in that game last night. I just thought it was, especially in the running game, it was a battle. And the physicality up to the whistle and after the whistle, guys were wrecking people. The pass rushing, Chris Jones, I thought was really good. I thought Bosa had a really good game, even though he didn't come up like the sacks you usually see him, but I thought he played very well. But you got to be physical and you got to be able to win in different ways. And I think right now that's something the Packers can't do. They have to win on offense and they have to win scoring some points. And that's where you need your defense, and that's where you need your special teams, because we saw some big special teams, I'll say miscues last night, but it definitely is a factor. muff punt, a blocked extra point. They were big plays in the game. So you need it from your special teams and you need it from your defense. And I know the Chiefs and the 49ers, they both play defense and they both play it really well. And they were physical. And the Chiefs are known for Mahomes and the offense and lighting it up. But they had a really good defense this year. And that's what carried them through the regular season. And I think that's what got them through a lot of the playoffs and gave them a chance to say, here's the ball, Mahomes, go win the game. Like, without that defense being as good as they were, the struggles they had all year on offensively, I don't think they would have gotten to the Super Bowl without how good they were defensively. And,
it's hard to argue that. I mean, just historically, Super Bowl winners have a top 10 defense. I mean, that's just, you got to have a great defense to win a Super Bowl. Even when you've got a great quarterback, you got to have a great defense. And that's, what the Bears fans love to remind Packers fans. Oh, you got 30 years of Hall of Fame quarterback, only 2 rings. Anyway. But you also are reminded of the Trent Dilfers of the world who win Super Bowls because of a legendary defense, right?
Carried by it.
So,
and I don't think the Packers need to be carried by it, but you got to have that ability to slug it out and to have your defense step up and win you a game, or at least give you the opportunity, like hold the opponent and say, here, we held them. You have the ball. Now go take it down the field and win it for us.
Yeah. And I think somebody said it on Twitter last night during that drive. Like, if and not to kick a man when he's down, but they're like, if Joe Barry was the defensive coordinator, he'd be giving up a score on this drive. And I think that's the point, is like, Spags, he went after him, man. He was aggressive, and you want that in that moment. And I wish I could give credit to the names, and I got to start writing you guys down when I see you on Twitter so we can call you out. But that you want to force either a game-winning play or force a big play to get the ball back before time runs out, right? And that's kind of some Madden thinking, but it works, right? And I think Kurt Bankert made one of the point at one point that people who are good at Madden could coach these NFL coaches on clock management, right? Because that's not their number one focus. But these kids who play Madden, dude, they are masterful at clock management. But, and it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but it's very real. Like, those of you who played Madden, you know that. But anyway, you want to force that, right? And it feels too often, especially under Joe Barry. But you watch a lot of defensive coordinators in that position. They go into prevent, or they go into let's not F up mode, and that's what happens. If you play not to lose, you're going to lose. And you got to play to win. Yeah,
and the Chiefs were aggressive, like you said. Like, they kept coming after him. We saw there was a big third down. They brought a corner blitz. The corner coming in had a free run. He knocked the pass down, forced the 4th down. I believe the 49ers got a field goal, but it got the Chiefs the ball back so they could go down the field. And I believe that was when they kicked the field goal to tie it and send it to overtime.
Yeah.
And they kept bringing pressure. Even in, at the end of overtime, Chris Jones was able to get pressure on Brock Purdy. He had a receiver. Juwan Jennings was open.
Yep.
Purdy had no time to throw. The pass sailed on him, and they had to kick a field goal. Mahomes got the ball back and end the game. So it went from, if he has time to throw, he's got a touchdown pass, because Juwan Jennings was just that wide open. He would have hit him and walked into the end zone. So, yeah.
You can't give him time.
No, it's playing aggressive. But the one thing I will point out about Chiefs defense is the team that scored the most points on them this year was the Packers.
Let's go.
Go. The only team that scored 27 points on them. So,
heck yeah, man. And that's something to pay attention to here. Like, we're all getting excited now. It's in New Orleans next year. The Packers have been in New Orleans. We've won a Super Bowl in New Orleans. We got a big old Packer fan from New Orleans that might have a shot at that halftime show. We'll see. A lot of speculation there, but very exciting to look at what lies ahead, because this Packers team going into 2024 does not have a lot of holes, not a lot of glaring holes. There are holes. Let's not mince words there, but not a lot of them. And you certainly have more than enough capital to fill those holes in this offseason. So looking at then outward, it's like, all right, we're pretty happy with where our team's at. We're excited, trust the GM, trust the coaching, there's some good things ahead. And you look outward, it's like, all right, who's the boogeyman? I don't think there's a boogeyman. And we've talked about this the last couple of weeks with the 49ers. They're probably, if there is one in the NFC at least, it's probably the 49ers. Now, is there anybody, and we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves a little bit, but, I want to at least float the question out there for you. Is there a team that is particularly young right now in the NFC? We're going to just close the book on the AFC. We're not worried about that. Whoever ends up in the Super Bowl, that's who will play. But in the NFC, is there a younger team who's been struggling but has sort of that potential, to break out this year and surprise people like, oh, all right, well, now they're a team to contend with? We know of the Cowboys. We know of the Eagles. We know of the 49ers. Like, who, in your opinion, has that ability to sort of be like waiting to surprise some people next year?
That's a really good question. I mean, the Lions aren't surprising anybody either because they just went to the championship.
No, they're out there now.
Like, yeah, so they would be in kind of that class too of like they're there. Like,
they're not a boogeyman. I wouldn't describe them as a boogeyman.
No. And I don't think there is. I mean, I know the Niners have beaten us in the playoffs several times, but and they eventually, hopefully, can get over that hump. But I hate like looking at it and saying like we have to build our team to beat one team because I don't think that always works out. Like they may not be that team next year. You may not even have to see them.
But it's more like, can you beat? Like I remember for a long time, like the Seahawks were like a bully, man, right? Because they had that defense, right. Legion of Boom, and you're just wondering, like, can you go into Seattle and win a playoff game? Like, I don't know, man. Like that is a tough task, even with Aaron Rodgers and everything that he had. I remember a few of those years going, gosh, I don't know. Like this is a good team, but can you go win a playoff game in Seattle? Whew. Like I just don't see that now. I don't see that team where I'm like, man, like we're pretty good, but I just don't know if we can go in somewhere and beat that team. And I kind of cut you off there, Tim, but that's what I mean. It's not that you would build to beat that team, but like, is there that team out there where you kind of hold yourself up against them and go, can you do this?
It would be the 49ers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so. I'm not scared of them in the sense that like, oh man, they can't beat us. Like no matter what we do, we're going to go in there and lose, even though they have had the Packers number in the playoffs.
Yeah.
The Packers were close with them and they should have, could have, would have, but they should have beat them in the divisional round this year. Like, so that gives me confidence that like they can go in there and win a game. They have to prove that, or they have to beat them. If they get them at Lambeau, you got to beat them at Lambeau. Wherever you get them, you got to prove it. But I wouldn't like, I don't see that as being impossible. I don't see that as being like this insurmountable, problem that they can't overcome is getting past the 40, like the Cowboys in the 90s, like they just couldn't win in Dallas.
Right.
And they never really did. The one time they beat them was a regular season game at Lambeau, which was great. And they smoked them in that game, but they never won down in Texas.
Right.
And it was like, no matter what they did down there, it was like, they just couldn't overcome it. But that was a great team with a lot of Hall of Famers that ended up winning 3 Super Bowls. So like, not too many teams were winning down there anyway.
That was a boogeyman, right? Yeah. Like that, when I talk about a boogeyman, you're just like, dang, like, how do you beat that? I think the Chiefs are a boogeyman in the AFC.
The Chiefs are because of Mahomes. Like but we don't have to worry about them unless we see them in the Super Bowl, which I would love to worry about seeing them in the Super Bowl. Yeah. Right? We'll deal with it then. Like if you're in the AFC, they're the boogeyman because look at the Bills. Like the Bills are a good team and they have a great quarterback too. They just can't get by the Chiefs, and that's going to be
Ravens too.
The Ravens, the Bengals have beaten them, but the Bengals have also lost to them in the playoffs. So it's like those teams in the AFC, no matter what you do, you still see Mahomes coming, and that's the boogeyman. In the NFC, I don't think there's that team. And to go back to your first question about is there a young up and coming team that maybe could like step to that level in the NFC? I don't see it right now. Like there's so much off season to go. Like we know what Dallas is, we know what the Eagles, like they're not maybe an under the radar team sort of is the Rams, but they got some young guys, but they're also really getting up there. Like Stafford's getting up there in age. Aaron Donald's getting up there in age. Cooper Kupp's been around for a while. They have some young pieces that are really good. And I think if those guys are healthy, they're a contender.
Yeah.
But you know, are they a Super Bowl contender? We'll see. I think they got a little ways to go. So I don't think there's a boogeyman. I don't think there's a team for the Packers to be scared of in the NFC. I think they're going to see the Lions and the 49ers. Those teams aren't going to go away, even though, there's a million things that are going to happen between now and September with these teams, and there's injuries and all that. But I think the Lions, the 49ers, the Eagles are going to be there too, possibly the Cowboys. And I think the Packers are right there among those teams. And, there's always teams that you're not thinking of that come from out of nowhere and shock you, and they're in the mix, like,
of course,
kind of like the Bucks,
right,
playoff game. And but yeah, there's not a team, like, as a Packer fan that I fear that I see them like, oh, we got to play them, like, forget about it, we can't beat them. Like, I don't see that team.
I don't either, man. But I would say, and the Bucks are actually one of the ones that made me think of this, because I think a lot of people saw the Bucks as like, well, they got Tom Brady and Gronk, and of course they went to Super Bowls. But it's like, yeah, but y'all got to pay attention to why Tom Brady chose the Bucks. He didn't just throw a dart at the walls like, it'd be nice to live in Tampa.
Yeah,
they had a nice defense, and he knew that. Like they and a lot like what the Packers have done, they nailed, like, I think 2 or 3 drafts in a row. So they had a really nice defense, they had a good old line, and then they were willing and able to load the free agents there to fill the rest of the gaps.
Yeah, and he had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin too.
Yeah,
they had some guys.
Yeah, but then Brady stepped in and it was like, oh dang, like, now they're a boogeyman. Like that's what happened, right? Like they went in and they got it done. But yeah, I think for me, the Rams are a good one. I think the Rams are a good one because they are going to have more capital this offseason than they have had in the last couple of off seasons. So they're a good scouting organization. Bringing in Puka Nacua, what a get, dude! Like, that is such a great addition. He was a 5th round pick. Yeah. When you're nailing, 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, like we talked about a little bit last week that Goot has done, like, you got to pay attention to that. The Rams are probably a good one to watch out for. The other one that comes to mind for me, where they seem to have a lot of talent starting to stack up. They haven't done a whole lot with it, but you've got a full offseason to maybe bring that picture a little bit more complete, is the Falcons, right? I think they've got a pretty decent...
That's a good one.
Yeah, they're one that I would watch for, because you plug a really good quarterback in there, or you get some good coaching for Desmond Ridder. They seem to have some potential to be a bit of a bully, maybe, if they can bring it together.
Yeah, they need a quarterback, but they have a lot of skill on offense. They haven't used it properly or enough, but
right.
And they're brought in a defensive head coach, so maybe the defense improves, and it improved a little bit this last season. But yeah, that's a good one if they get a quarterback.
Yeah,
there's
an opportunity. Like, there's plenty of quarterbacks in this draft.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to get one of the top 2 guys, but then 3, 4, 5, they may have a shot in the first round.
Yeah, and we're starting to get into it. We'll put the draft coverage at the second half of this, and we're not going to touch on quarterbacks, but there's a lot of folks talking about now the quarterbacks in this draft, and it's obviously not just C.J. Williams. He's the headliner, but I'm even seeing people saying that he's not their number 1 in this draft, which. We'll have that argument one day. We're not going to get into that today, and we'll do it with some film and, objective football. But it's the fact that you've got multiple intelligent people, I would say, not just random, bloggers and podcasters, but you got some intelligent folks saying, well, maybe this guy's the best. Maybe this guy's the best. Obviously, we've heard that Harbaugh thinks J.J. McCarthy's the best, and wow. He's a bit biased, but those are still big words for a guy who's now an NFL coach. So it's interesting to me that there are multiple guys that people will even try to make an argument for over C.J. Williams. I'm saying Caleb Williams, C.J. Williams. C.J. Williams, a Badgers receiver. Sorry, guys. Anyway, Caleb Williams, you guys knew who I was talking about. But yeah, so in any other time when you've got this guy who some are calling a generational talent, it's kind of silly to talk about somebody else as being better than that guy, right? Like, you had a little bit of that with Andrew Luck and RG3, but everybody still was like, nah, it's Andrew Luck. Like, you're good, RG3, but it's Andrew Luck. And then, you had Trevor Lawrence. Like, Trevor Lawrence is the guy. Joe Burrow. It's like, Joe Burrow's the guy. In this case, there's a lot of people that are talking about Caleb Williams as not the guy. Not a bust, but not number one, right? Whether it's Drake May or J.J. McCarthy or Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels.
Down the LSU quarterback.
Yeah.
But then you got the kid out of Washington. You got Bo Nix. I mean, there's some quarterbacks in this draft. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. So to bring this back, the Falcons could find a pretty solid dude and not need to get the top one. So that's one that I would watch out for in the NFC next season is definitely the Falcons. But let's move on here. Let's put this season away now. Let's focus a little bit more on the Packers and building the 2024 Green Bay Packers roster here. What would you say is the biggest position of need this offseason?
So for me, I think it's a secondary, and take your pick. I mean, I think they need a corner, but obviously the safety position there's not much there. Everybody's either a free agent or the guys that are on the roster are more special teams guys so far in their careers. So you need immediate starters at safety. I think you need at least somebody, if they're not an immediate starter, they're immediate competition to start at cornerback. And that's just such an important position that I think it's a high need, is to get another guy to go with Valentine, go with hopefully a healthy Eric Stokes. And I think the nickel position in that equation, like maybe they bring Keyshawn Nixon back, maybe not. I'm not,
Savage.
I don't like Savage there, but whatever they decide to do there, and I don't have I don't know what they're going to do with Nixon.
Yeah.
But even if he's back, I think you need to get somebody, preferably, a draft pick in there to compete with him and hopefully take his job at some point, because they need to improve at nickel and they need to use it better. I mean, there's no blitzing from it. There's no creativity. They don't match with it. It's pretty much Keyshawn's the nickel back.
Yeah.
And it's like, why can't other guys flow through there based on who they're covering, who they're matching up with, who you're playing that week, who the slot receivers are. So yeah, I think cornerback and safety, to me, in the secondary, they have holes there. It'll be interesting too, because Jeff Hafley came up as a defensive backs coach, as a corners coach. So I think that's going to obviously be a big position of emphasis for him, is the secondary. And he may be very hands-on there too. And he may have specific needs or wants that, what he wants to see as far as the prototype at safety and corner. So that'll be interesting to kind of track who they acquire. Does he have specifics? Like, I need a guy that's a certain size or that has certain athletic capabilities or certain speed, whatever it may be. But yeah, I think secondary to me is the number one need. And after that, I would say I think they need just overall offensive line depth, potentially a starter at right guard, but not only, somebody at least push Sean Ryan at right guard. I think they need competition at center, and you're going to need a swing tackle. And then from there, I think offensively they're in pretty good shape. They have to they're going to have to add a running back or two. But I don't I wouldn't be spending free agent money on that. I wouldn't be drafting somebody obviously in the first round. But they do need to add there. I think a lot of the needs defensively.
Yeah. That it took me a minute to think about this question, because I started going across the board. I'm like, well, gosh, you just don't have huge needs. But I think the safety position is the obvious one. If your guys are healthy, you're not in a bad spot at corner, and especially with the way that they've been pulling them through. And then now you've got a pretty good defensive staff for the secondary. You're not in a terrible spot there, but you definitely want some good safeties back there, at least one quarterback back there, right? Like, you want one chief of the defense back there that is directing traffic and has guys in the right place. And, that is a huge piece. And the last time we really saw that was when Adrian Amos was playing well. man, he was a great leader back there. And there were plays that he made that were very subtle, but were just incredibly savvy, incredibly intelligent, and big difference makers. And you just haven't seen that. And that's, I think that was like 2020 Amos. 2021 was all right, and then he really started tailing off after that. But, yeah, I mean, that's what you want to see, man. You want like that captain back there. So I'd be looking for that. Hopefully, the new staff, maybe they can bring that out in an Anthony Johnson Jr. You know what I mean? Like he showed some potential. You didn't get to see a lot of him, which might be a good thing. He didn't have to have a ton of pressure on him. He got to learn from the guys in front of him. They weren't perfect, but they had a solid season. They definitely could have been more of a liability this last season than they were. So, yeah, I think the safety position for me is at the top of that list. I think that's one where I'm not even looking at the top of the draft for that if I'm Goot, and I think that was one of the comments that he was alluding to in his press conference about going to get a veteran guy. You've either got to go after a free agent or you got to make a trade. Like, go get a guy who's not learning how to be in this league. Go get a leader. Go get a guy who's already been there, done that, learned the playbook, learned the way that the league works, and is ready to command a defense. Obviously we talked a little bit about Winfield Jr. last week. That would be probably the ideal, pie in the sky person to pull in there, but there's a lot of options out there. So we'll get into those. We're not going to analyze the safety position player by player right now. But if I had to pick a second one, it would be that interior O-line depth. Would love to see them draft somebody to come in and compete with Myers, get that center position a little bit more shored up. Give him, if he's going to be the guy, give him some competition, right? Competition breeds success. He sees a young dude playing well beneath him, and maybe that, brings his level up, or maybe that's all we need to say, all right, he's not the guy this other guy is. But would love to see just another high-quality starter, whether it's a right guard or center on the interior offensive line there, so that you can leave Jenkins where he is, leave Tom where he is. Stop with the shuffling of these other guys. Let's shore up one of those, and then if you've got a kind of a flyer in at the right guard still, like a Sean Ryan, or you still leave Myers in there at center, fine. Then you've got 4 out of 5 guys that are locked down. That's what you want. But yeah, you need that depth, and I think that they've proven that they're going to continue to draft the O-line every year, and they should. You should have probably at least 1 or 2 guys that you're pulling in the later rounds to bring in, keep fresh bodies for injuries' sake and all of that. So those would be the 2 things, and funny enough, they don't really shape up at the top of the draft. It's going to be very interesting to see what Goot thinks he needs to do with that 25th pick, because you got 11 picks going into this draft. You certainly don't need to trade back and get more. If you trade up, who in the heck is that? Like, you know what I mean? Like that yeah. I think at that point you're looking at maybe like a defensive tackle, maybe a linebacker. I'm thinking about the kid out of Texas as far as a defensive tackle goes. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's like a real defensive impact player. But if you're talking about moving up in the draft, man, like who is that?
Yeah, and I the spot that they're at, they're kind of like in that range where you're almost like, unless it's somebody that you just have so highly rated that's falling, you're almost better just saying at 25, because maybe the guy you get at 25 is going to, a guy you could get at 35, it's going to be in that same range. Like there's almost like always a cluster of, guys from 15 to 40 are kind of going to be similarly graded. There's not a whole lot of difference. But if there's somebody they really like that's falling, if it's somebody that they have a 1st-round grade on and he's their last 1st-round grade, that's what Jordan Love was.
Exactly. Maybe
you go up and say, all right, this is our last guy that we have a 1st-round grade on. Let's just go get him because they have the extra draft capital. Maybe they do that. But I agree with like trading back to get more picks when you already have 11 and you have the roster that they do, at least offensively.
Very unlikely.
Like, I don't think you need it unless you, and this could get real but you trade back and then you move around from there, trading up. And like, there's, you can make a million trades and still come out of it. But
Well, that's how he got Jair. That was
Right,
the 2018 draft, I think, right?
Yeah, it was his first draft. Yeah.
It was, I think they were at like 14 or something. They traded back. You're going, you didn't need to trade back. Why'd you do that? And it's like, oh, wait, he trades back up.
And got
and he
first
turned
round
it into another first-round pick.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe there's maneuvering he does that way. But, yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't think they need more picks. That doesn't, unless they see a lot of, like, guys that are second and third round grades for them, where they can move back and get more picks and use them there, and maybe move around and make some trades in that range. Maybe you do that. But I think you probably stay at 25 and just pick the guy.
Well, and so here's what's interesting, and we'll get more into this as we go into our draft coverage here in a few minutes. But there's, we can look at historical trends, and certainly there's always an anomaly, so everything's possible. But you can start doing a little bit of a process of elimination here, right? The Packers don't draft running backs in the first round. You probably aren't even going to see that anomaly. It's not going to happen. I think the last time they drafted a running back in the first round was in the 80s. So it just doesn't happen. So we're not even going to consider running backs in day one in the first round. It's not going to happen. And to be fair, I don't think that there is a running back in this class that is worth that conversation anyway. From there, they also don't draft O-line in the first round. And when they have, it hasn't gone well, right? Bulaga is the exception. Bulaga turned out well. He wasn't, Trent Williams. He wasn't even David Bakhtiari, but he was good, right? He was good right tackle for a long time. Beyond that, Sherrod was a bust.
He was
right.
Very good.
Yeah, he was a bust, and then you have to go back into the early 90s to find, some other guys, and they turned out okay, but again, not like, not all pros. They weren't great. So I would even rule out offensive line in the first round. And I know, and this is hilarious, Packers Twitter's out there, and it's like 99.9% of these mock drafts that are flying around that people are doing out there, it's either an offensive tackle or Cooper DeJean or however you say his name. And I'm like, so we can almost guarantee that those won't be the pick. Like if there's a consistent theme in mock drafts amongst Packers Twitter that strong, it's not happening. Almost certainly not going to happen. So they don't draft O-line in the first round, and they haven't had to. They've been really good at finding guys late. I mean, everywhere else, like second round and back. Bakhtiari, you find in the fourth round. Who might be Bakhtiari's replacement? It certainly looks like you found in the seventh round. The guy on the other side, you found in the fifth round, right? Like there's all Jenkins, second round. So yeah, I just wouldn't expect them, especially because they don't have a glaring need. I wouldn't expect them to use a pick on offensive line in the first round.
I mean, I don't think so either. I think there's the only way that I could see them doing it is if it's a guy that they feel very strongly can play and stay at left tackle and is going to be better than Rasheed Walker. Like they're not taking a center. I would be shocked. And I don't see him taking a guard. Now I know they like to take guys who are college tackles and then move them to guard. They've done that plenty of times. Or guys with versatility that play multiple positions, and maybe they could do that. But
there's one in that range that we could talk about here in a few minutes that I picked out, but it's just not in the Packers' DNA to do it,
Yeah, Myers was a second-round pick at center. He was a late second-round pick, but he was a second-round pick.
Yep.
I don't see him taking a center in the first round. I don't see him taking somebody who they think is just a guard, like even somebody that you think you can plug and play at right guard from day one. Like they just haven't done that. No. Maybe they they hadn't taken an off-ball linebacker in the first round in a while, and they took Quay Walker. So maybe they surprise us.
Well, the one thing I would say about that is it's a copycat league, and they just got beat by Tampa, who had some awesome off-ball linebackers.
Yeah, maybe that had a factor, but I'm in agreement. I think the one exception would be is if there's a left tackle they really like and they say, we think he could be better than Rasheed Walker. then I think they would pull the trigger and do that. And Rasheed Walker would either go to the swing, be the swing tackle, or Rasheed Walker would continue to start until the rookie took his job at some point. But that's the only way I think they would go offensive line at that spot.
Yeah, I agree. And there are a couple guys. The center out of Oregon, he seems to be graded somewhere in that range. It's not out of the question, but it's just historically not something that they've done. So you can start looking at these things and try to figure out where you think they might go, and that's what we're going to be trying to do throughout the offseason here leading up to the draft. But there's a couple of themes, right? So we just mentioned one of them, which is just historically they don't draft certain positions in the first round. The other side of that is Goot has, and we'll get into some examples of this, but he has historically picked from deeper classes. Like, so if the receivers are deep, he's gotten receivers. And the quarterbacks were deep when he took Jordan Love. I would watch for him to pull from a deep position group in this round, or in this draft in the first round, just purely going after best player available. And it's really not hard to understand how that works, right? So if you've got a really deep class, a guy who's available at 25 typically might be the caliber of player that's available at 10 or 15. So it makes a lot of sense to go for these deeper position groups, but we don't know what he thinks is a deeper. We can look at what we think and what the media thinks, and what PFF grades say, and all of that kind of stuff. But what does Goot and the other GMs ultimately who are drafting and determining where these kids go, what do they think? And that's what we'll really be telling on draft day. But we'll look at these things and we can get an idea of what classes are deeper or what positions are deeper than others. But that's what I would look for. And so a couple of positions that are incredibly deep in this draft: quarterback, receiver, edge rusher, and corner. So out of those, that's good news for us. There's likely to be a high quality corner there at 25 when you're on the clock. Now ask Packers Twitter about any specific guy, and not any of them will ever be there. So don't go off of that. But just looking at the group, it's like by numbers, one of them is going to be there. So yeah, I think that is what I would hope for our first round pick. If they're not going to trade it, he's not going to either bring in somebody from the outside for that pick, or maneuver around one way or another. You're actually going to pick at 25. I think your best case scenario ends up being at corner or maybe safety. We'll see how the combine sometimes can nudge those DBs a little bit. But what do you think, man? If you had to just guess a position for the first pick, what would you think it was?
Yeah, I mean, it's still early, but I'm kind of with you on corner. I could definitely see that because there are guys. I think it seems like it's a deep position, and it seems like there's going to be several that go in the first round. It's a position they like to draft. It's a position they really like athletes, and it's one of those key positions for them. There's certain positions we talked about that they won't draft in the first round. And there's other positions like cornerback where they definitely will draft in the first round. It's a hugely important position in a passing league like the NFL is. So I could see it being cornerback, just because there's going to be some guys there. You mentioned safety. It is such a need that I think they're going to take a safety at some point. I don't know yet. I mean, from reading and listening to all the draft experts, it's not a strong safety class as far as round one guys go. I think you're going to see guys going in the second round. But to your point, we may see guys test really well at combine or pro day. You go back to the tape. And the other thing is too, like, what the general managers and the scouts and all that stuff, the guys who they really like, a lot of times they don't filter out to the media until like the week of the draft. And then you start seeing some of these mock drafts with like, hey, this guy's rising, he might go in the first round. And that's because it's finally getting to them through their contacts and front offices that like these guys are higher rated than what the media's picked up on so far. So maybe there are some safeties out there that go a little bit earlier than what's expected right now. But yeah, I could see corner just because it seems like there's guys there. Possibly edge rusher again. And I know a lot of people are going to be not a lot of people. There's going to be some people that are going to say, why another edge rusher when he just took Van Ness last year and he just paid Rashawn Gary. But I could see those two positions. If I had to bet right now, though, I'm with you. I'd say they end up with a corner in the first round.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that, man. So we'll see. But yeah, we're going to take y'all through it. We're going to go position by position. This week, we wanted to take a look at the day one edge rushers and day one tackles. As I've just stated, day one tackles is kind of it's moot, right? Like, because they're probably not going to take a tackle on day one. But you never know. There is one guy here I'm going to call attention to as a potential target. But lead us out of the gate here, Tim. What does this edge group look like for day one around that 25th pick?
Yeah, so I think it's obviously this is a position they will take in the first round. Van Ness and Rashawn Gary. They paid Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith. They highly value edge rushers, as they should.
Yep.
For me, I can never have enough edge rushers. So if they take one in the first round, I'll be perfectly fine with it because you need all the pass rushers you can get. And looking at this, not just for 2024, but like into the future, it's a sneaky need position for them. Rashawn Gary's not going anywhere. He signed his contract. We know that. They need Van Ness to develop. He was just a first-round pick. But Preston Smith's, 31 years old. His contract is getting high with some of these cap hits because he was one of those guys. He's one of those guys they had to kick the can down the road to keep him and, restructure it. I think he's got another year, maybe 2 years in Green Bay, depending on how he plays and how much of the cap hit he still has left on the contract. So his time's going to be coming to an end in Green Bay. He's still a good player, and I'm not saying it should be coming to an end. It's just his age and his contract status.
It's just inevitability.
And the Packers' history of how they deal with guys who are aging out. So, within the next year or two, he's going to probably be moving on. You have Enigbare, who's a nice depth piece, but he's coming off. He just tore his ACL in the Dallas game. We may not see him till midway point of the season, late in the year. Who knows how quickly he rehabs and heals up and they clear him, but you can't count on him for at least the early portion of the season.
He doesn't seem like he's done. Like he doesn't seem like he's pushed for the starting job. Like he seems like he's settled in as a backup.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like I think he's a nice backup. I think he's a nice rotational. Like if he's your fourth edge guy. That's
comes in fresh late in the game. Yeah, he's going to kick a tackle's butt.
He can give the starters a rest, and he's not going to come in there and be a complete liability.
Right.
And he'll flash and make some plays, and then there's weeks you're going to be like, oh yeah, I didn't realize he was out there. But that's a rotational role player. He's fine for that. But if you want more than that from your pass rushers, then that's part of it. And Brenton Cox was on the roster. He barely played last year, so who knows what they even have there. And then the other part of the thing that we can't really answer yet is how are they going to use these guys differently? There's all this talk they're going to be a 4-3. Maybe Jeff Hafley wants more guys on the edge. Maybe he wants different body types. Maybe he wants, faster guys or bigger. Like that kind of plays into it too. So I think to me, edge rushers, like I said, it's maybe not a need, maybe not, it's not up there with corner and safety and offensive line, but it's something they could use more of. So it wouldn't shock me if they took somebody in the first round there. I think there are some guys. I don't want to get too far into it because we don't have testing numbers. And this is one of those positions where they need to see athletes. They need to see freak athletes to take them in the first round. They are not.
Well, we've talked about the RAS score.
Yeah, the RAS.
That's a big deal. And some of these guys will, be like, oh, he looks pretty good. He had a pretty good college career, and his RAS score will come out to be not good. And
like, there's no way they're taking him.
Not going to take him.
They take freak athletes, big, long arms, able to the 10-yard splits and the short shuttle times and all that. All the testing numbers have to be through the roof for them to take them in the first round. And they were for Van Ness last year.
Yep.
So they need freak athletes. We don't have those numbers yet, so it's hard to really say like who would be on the Packers board. Who could they really look at? There are a few guys. There's a couple guys from Alabama. Dallas Turner. He had a really productive career for Alabama. He's been a starter. I don't want to be Mr. He's not going to be there, because we'll get into this, and I don't want to. There'd be 50 guys who aren't going to be there for pick 25.
Right.
But he's the top edge rusher in this class. He's not Will Anderson coming out of Alabama last year. He's not on his level.
No.
But he's pretty damn good too. And his teammate Chris Braswell's on the other side. Now he's not as highly touted as Dallas Turner, but he's probably, if he's not a round one guy, he's probably going to be a round two guy. I like Jarrett Verse a lot from Florida State. Watch his film. He transferred in there. He's been there for 2 years. He's a big, like, physical, strong rusher. They move him around a little bit. They gave him some reps even inside, which is cool. I'd like to see that versatility. Really, I'd love to see them use Rashawn Gary a little differently at times, and Lucas Van Ness differently at times in the new defense. But yeah, Verse is physical. He's got good hands. He plays a violent game. I'll be interested to see what he tests and what his official measurements are, but I like him a lot too. There's a kid out of UCLA. I'm going to kill his name, so I was just going to say his last name, Latu. Yeah. Really good hands, really productive. Problem is, from what I've seen, he's got short arms, which they don't really like.
Yep.
And he had a neck. He was originally at University of Washington, had a neck injury. They wouldn't clear him to come back. And he went to transfer. He found the team, UCLA, would clear him and get him on the field. So we'll see what he tests. But with that injury history, I don't think he would be a Packer guy. Now, he's played and hasn't had a neck injury since then, so maybe he's fine, but it's weird that Washington wouldn't clear him and UCLA would. And we know how the Packers medical staff is conservative.
Miles Jack, another UCLA linebacker. That was an issue. There was a lot of he was looking like one of the top dudes, and then he fell in the draft because of his injury status. And he was playing at that point. So, yeah.
So I don't know.
That's very real.
I don't know if he would be on the Packers board just from the medical standpoint. And then there was a kid, Darius Robinson from Missouri. He just had a great Senior Bowl week. I think he was named the top defensive player. He's a bigger guy. He's like 6'5", 280, 285. So it'd be interesting how they use him, because I think in the prior defense, I don't know if he can stand up and play edge. I don't know if he has that ability. This defense, he probably could, and they probably could kick him inside at times and have him rush that way. But he's big and long, and he had a really nice season for Missouri. He's physical. He's athletic. We'll see what his actual athletic testing score will be. But he's another name, and they like drafting Senior Bowl guys, so they got a good look at him. I think they've taken 10 guys from the Senior Bowl over the last 2 years.
Yep.
He was productive. So those are some guys. There's a few more that'll probably pop in there too, but I don't want to give too many right now until we actually have their official heights and weights and all the testing.
Well, and we're trying to keep this conversation limited to that day one range, that 25th pick. I mean, you could keep going, and you're starting to get into that day two territory. Some of these guys probably are even day two.
As we have more information, we'll be able to like really pin it down and be like, all right, these are the guys that maybe the Packers are going to have on their board just based on, their history and who they like and the kind of athletes they like.
Well, and really stuff comes out of the combine. Like you start to hear about, this guy interviewed well, or you obviously see the physical testing. Pro days are another one that can affect this stuff. So there's a lot. Absolutely. And I think this position specifically, since we're doing this as basically the first position that we're going over, we'll come back to it, right? We're going to refresh some of this stuff after the combine when we've got a little bit more meaningful positioning on them. But I think one thing to pay attention to here, and you were kind of dancing around it, the defense is changing. So what we don't know is what is the plan for Van Ness and Rashawn Gary. Now, I don't think that this is a situation, and some folks might remember this, where, Aaron Campman ends up being just like the odd man out because he can't fit into the 3-4 defense, right? He tried as hard as he could. It just didn't work. I don't think that you're going to bring in Jeff Hafley with last year's first-round pick, and then basically one of, if not your best defensive player, ending up being lesser pieces. You know what I mean? I think they will be used differently, and both of them have good experience with their hand in the dirt. So I don't think that that's a coincidence either. But if you're going to put Rashawn Gary and Van Ness down on the line, which they very well could, you need those off-ball linebackers behind them then. You need guys at that outside linebacker position now. Quay Walker maybe fills one of those positions, depending on if Devondre Campbell's there in the middle. But, yeah, so I don't think it would be totally out of the question or even, ridiculous to think that they could take an edge rusher or an outside linebacker type guy with that first-round pick because of that, right? Like, it's like the way you shuffle those bodies, now you actually do end up potentially needing another outside linebacker type guy that can rush the passer but who can also run, and cover. And the one that I look at, and I just hope everything goes well with this guy because I think that he could be pretty exciting for the Packers to bring in, is Letu. He had the highest PFF grade of all the edge rushers last season, and it wasn't even close. His is 96.3, which is like an insane PFF grade. Like 80s is great. I think 80s is considered elite. So a high 90 is out of this world. And
he looks like he's a technician already. He uses his hands, and they move him around. Like there's reps of him coming inside over guards and rushing. Yeah.
He's one that, and right now PFF has him at 18 in this group or in this class, like his overall rating. Mm-hmm. That's a guy where, all right, if the way the board is playing out is available there between 15 and 20, and similar situation where it's like we've only got a few round one graded guys left, and he's one of them, that's a guy where I think maybe you see them trade up. It's like, let's go get this guy. He's there. There's a good opportunity to trade for him. Let's go get him. We think he's a difference maker. Maybe there's a DB that looks like that too. We'll get there when we break down the DBs. But that's the one that I would look at. It's like, oof, I'd like that one. That would be a fun one to have in a Packers uniform.
Yeah, absolutely. So I talk about the edge guys. Let's flip it over to the other side and the guys that block the edge guys.
Let's do it.
Who do you like at offensive tackle so far in the first round?
Yeah, and this you do have to kind of break this down because there's a few that it's just like they're not going to be. We know that. Joe Alt, we're not going to talk about Joe Alt. Guy's amazing, right? Top 5 pick, maybe top 2 pick. Excellent player. Looks like, a franchise guy. Your guy out of Penn State, probably another one, right? Like top 10. I don't see him coming out of the top 10. Then you get into, I think it's Fuaga, maybe. I believe that's the Oregon State tackle.
Yeah.
I need to get over there to my other grades.
I think he was right tackle, like pretty much strictly right tackle, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong about that, but I believe he was mostly a right tackle. But I know, he's
and they're not specifying here on PFF either. But yeah, so Fuaga, he's 6'6", 330, beast, right? Dude's a beast, and he is one that if they value him enough, and he's there again past like 15, okay, you might trade up for that guy depending on what you're trying to do with the rest of your draft. But he's one that I would say there's a very, 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 very slim to none chance that he makes it that far. Where you do start seeing a guy who could get there is J.C. Latham, the Alabama tackle. Again, 6'6", 335. He fits the size that the Packers look for in O-line. Big, but not too big, athletic. And he's another one that I think could – he's Alabama, dude. They're smart. Like, they come out of there, they know how to play football. He can shift around on the line if you need him to. Georgia, there's a tackle out of Georgia. I don't like that as a fit. Amarius Mims, he looks like a talented dude, but I just don't see him as a guy that the Packers would take. He's 6'7", 340. He's pretty big.
I saw something on him. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
He made 8 starts in 3 years there. That's it.
I was just about to say, it's like he's inexperienced, so it's like. I just don't see it. I don't see that happening at all. Even if he's there, it just doesn't seem like a guy that the Packers would take. But yeah, you're right. Like 8 starts, you got to ask why.
Yeah, like George is good, obviously, but what maybe there's some injury issues and stuff, but
another thing
point,
you probably want to stay away from.
Right,
anyway.
And then that's another thing. Like he's inexperienced and he's been hurt. Who knows?
But that brings me to this next one, and this is a guy that I think could be valued by the Packers at that 25th pick, if not definitely with that 41st pick there in the early second round. Kid out of Arizona, Jordan Morgan, 6'6", 320. His size is right on with what they look for. He's versatile on the line, and he projects as a guy that could shift in from tackle to go to guard. That's one where, depending on, again, some of the other things that will come to pass, the interviews at the combine, and athleticism and all of that, but that's one I would keep an eye on. He sounds like a guy that's got Packers written all over him. But then, so yeah, you got a few more. A kid out of OU, Tyler Gaitan, a kid out of Washington. But now you're starting to get into these day 2 guys, so we won't go too deep into that. The last one that I would mention, and this is another one that he seems like a Packers kind of guy, just from the surface level stuff that I've looked at. He's got a high PFF grade, 6'5", 318. He's a kid out of Yale. Kieran, and I'm going to try this. I'm sorry if I don't do it right. Amagaji, something like that.
Sounds good to me.
We'll call him Kieran. But yeah, so he's another one that I would keep an eye on as this process unfolds. He seems like an athletic, smart dude that could maybe, rise up the board a little bit. But I wouldn't look much beyond that as far as that day 1 pick goes. And again, we preface all of this with saying the Packers just don't use first-round picks on offensive line, and when they have, it hasn't gone great. So I wouldn't really count on them targeting an offensive lineman here, tackle or guard. But if they were, again, like a scenario of like, hey, this is the last first-round grade guy we've got on our board here, I would watch for that Jordan Morgan pick. He seems like a Packers guy.
Yeah, and from what I've read, he's real athletic. He can get out there and pass pro. He can get out. They move him in the run game a lot.
Yeah,
athletic dude. And like you said, he probably has versatility to kick inside the guard if they wanted to do that. But I think if they're taking him in the first round, they're projecting him to be a tackle for sure. But yeah, I think I've seen him mocked a lot of people for what I mean. I don't put much into mock drafts at this point in the season, but a lot of people have him in that range. A lot of people have had him to the Packers from what I've seen. So yeah, it makes sense. We'll see what his actual measurements are. I don't think he's as big as some of the other guys, but they don't necessarily take a whole lot of 330-pound linemen. You just, even at tackle, I mean, their guys aren't huge. Rasheed Walker's good size, but Zach Tom's a smaller tackle, at least weight wise. So they don't prefer these massive maulers on the edge. They want athleticism. Athleticism. So, and he would fit into that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and he seems to be stronger in the run game than the pass game, and so I could see them, preferring that. But yeah, so that is how I would look at the tackle position here. We'll look at some day 2, day 3 guys next week. That is where we're gonna maybe have a little bit more fun with this position. Again, for the reasons of David Bakhtiari, Zach Tom, they've just done well on day 2 and day 3 at this position. So there's a few that we can get into there. But yeah, man. So any other call outs about the the off season here before we wrap this one up?
No, I mean, we talked last week. Actually, our last podcast, we had breaking news. They were hiring Derek Ainsley as the secondary coach. They haven't announced any of this stuff other than Hafley. I'm sure it's coming at some point. They just probably want to get everybody, all their coaches. They're going to hire quality control guys. But the one spot that'll be interesting that we haven't touched on and nobody's really covered, the strength and conditioning coach, because they're making a change there. And, that's going to be interesting what the background is of whoever it may be, what their philosophies are going to be, because I'm imagining it's going to probably be a pretty big change from what they were doing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it's going to stay the same, just a different person. So I imagine that LaFleur has an idea of how he wants these guys trained and prepared. And it's got to be, attacking the soft tissue injuries that they've had with all these guys with hamstring injuries. So, yeah, that's something that's going to be big and going to be key for the development of the team, especially in the offseason once they get going again in April for the OTAs. I'll be interested whenever they make that hire official and we find out who it is, to find out a little bit about their background and, what that person and what LaFleur are hoping to change in the strength and conditioning program.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. I was thinking that too. And I was even thinking earlier today, like there just hasn't even been any chatter about that.
No, nothing at all.
Very, very interesting. I will say, and this is a good follow on Twitter. So if you guys are looking for good follows on Twitter, he's a good one. But Christian Watson's dad has been very, very outspoken about what the approach needs to be and all of that. Not in an overly critical way. I mean, he's a former NFL player himself. But he made a very good point, and I read this earlier today, that Christian Watson didn't have an injury issue before he got to the NFL.
No.
And the way that he positioned this is you need to figure out, what did he say? Like he took on something over these past 2 years, and you need to get rid of it. Is the way he framed
it to what guess whatever his training was, whatever they were asking him to do. Yeah. So
I thought that was very, very interesting because that's not like the default way to assume an injury issue, right? Like in fact, I would say that you probably assume you're not doing enough of something if you're having an issue, right? So it would, instead of being subtraction, it would be addition. And he's suggesting that subtraction is actually what needs to happen here. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be. I mean, I've been around, athletes, college athletes, professional athletes. When I played at Oshkosh, our surgeon was Dr. McKenzie, the Packers surgeon. He's been there for decades now. He's on the sideline every game. But that one to me was, I was like, okay, that's a very, very interesting way to think about that. And we know that Christian Watson's heading down to UW to do some research there with the university. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how that whole situation is handled and how maybe what they figure out down there in Madison might maybe lead to a new strength and conditioning coach or have something to do with who's hired there. Something to watch, though, for sure. So good call out there, man.
And as we talk about the draft, the thing that I always kind of, I don't know, it bugs me a little bit, but like these guys are training for the combine right now, and then they're training for their pro days. Like they're doing, they're running the 40-yard dash, and they're jumping, the broad jump and the high, all these jumps that they do and the short jump.
Like track athletes.
Right. They're training for stuff that isn't actually football. Yeah. And then you draft them and you bring them right in the mini camp and the off season, and like, then some rookies get hurt.
Yeah.
Or then they come in and their bodies aren't ready for NFL football, and then you're waiting for the second year jump. Well, it's because they're spending their offseason right now training for like Olympic events that have nothing to do with football. It's just to see how much of an athlete you are. And now you're going to turn around and say, now you have to be a football player. Their bodies aren't ready for it.
Yeah, that's a good point, man.
And I'm not saying that's Christian Watson, what led to his hamstrings, but it's just in general. Like I don't know. It's the way it is for the combine and for the pro day, and I don't think it's going to change. But you see some of these injuries for rookies, and you're like, well, what do you expect? Their body's not ready to take a pounding because they haven't trained for it.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out, and rookies, and I don't know any data around this, but rookies seem to get injured quite a bit, even in the off season. So that there might be something to that, but it's not going to change because these guys are ultra competitors, and they understand that the devil's in the details, and 1/10 on their 40 could mean millions of dollars and all that kind of stuff. One extra rep on the bench if you're a lineman or something. So you're not going to get those guys to not compete in that way.
The NFL has to change it, and they won't.
Yeah, I think that's where it would have to come from, or you'd have to have some kind of medical guidance of like, hey, listen, don't train like that. Yes, we want to see how well you can do these things, but don't do it that way. That's not the way. We'll see. We're but mere fans here, solving all these problems every Monday night, right?
Yeah.
So, well, thank y'all for hanging out with us this week on the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. Check us out on YouTube, Twitter, or X, Facebook, and Instagram. Spike that like button for us if y'all have enjoyed this episode, and please subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. And we will see y'all next week, Packers fans. Go, Pack, go!